Welcome back to RFL. We will continue to monitor the shootings in California, but right now we're going to pivot to New York politics, specifically the Albany corruption trials that have been making front page news. First, we're going to explore whether the conviction of former Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver will cause a seismic shift in the state capitol. And then we focus on the guy in charge, Andrew Cuomo, and a fascinating behind-the-scenes look at the governor. But we begin in Lower Manhattan, where for the past 2 weeks, two guys who were once the most powerful people in Albany have been fighting for their political lives. Of course, I'm referring to former Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver and former State Senate Majority Leader Dean Skelos. The Skelos trial is in full swing, but the jury just swung against Silver and convicted him of all 7 federal corruption charges. That was a huge victory for U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara. Here's that anti-corruption crusader's take on the situation in Albany.
By now, 2 things should be abundantly clear. First, public corruption is a deep-seated problem in New York State. It is a problem in both chambers. It is a problem on both sides of the aisle. And second, we are deadly serious about tackling that problem.
And of course, you can't talk about Albany without talking about Andrew Cuomo. The governor is also trying to make cracking down on corruption part of his legacy. Here's what he had to say at his inauguration 5 years ago.
We will propose a Clean Up Albany plan with real reform. This is not going to be a situation where the people of this state will have suffered for years and lost trust, and now we're going to give them a watered-down or half-baked ethics reform bill. They're going to have real ethics reform.
Cuomo has spoken a lot about cleaning up Albany, but so far there hasn't been any meaningful reform. And of course, the governor disbanded the corruption-fighting Moreland Commission just months after he formed it. With all of that as the backdrop, we go to Richard, who spent the day in Lower Manhattan, just steps away from the federal courthouse. He spoke with our Dominic Carter before we got wind of the shooting in San Bernardino, and they discussed both the Silver and the Skelos trials. Rich?
Well, thank you very much, Andrew. That's right. I'm going to do Dominic now. Right behind me where the lights are on the 4th floor. Now, that was the courthouse. That is the courthouse where Sheldon Silver got the bad news this Monday. And, Dominic, you were there through it all, and you're here also for the Skelos trial. Give an idea of what we couldn't see. We all saw when they came out and everything else. You were there when the verdict came back. I'm curious, because we'll talk about with the attorneys later. Not one witness brought by the defense. They chose not to put Sheldon Silver up on the trial. You got the vibe they were confident that they didn't show that quid pro quo. When they came back and they said not just guilty, but guilty on all counts, what was it like where Mr. Silver and legal team were sitting?
Your assessment, Richard, is correct. The fact that the defense did not put on a single witness is a reflection, and it's traditionally a reflection of when defense counsel believes the prosecution has not made their case. That's what, as you have pointed out night after night, that's exactly what they thought happened here in this courtroom. They could not have been more incredibly wrong in terms of their assessment. You know, Richard, from being inside the courtroom, the staff that we had with us also inside the courtroom, it was interesting because when you talk about Sheldon Silver, this is a man, you talk night after night about 3 men in a room who decides what basically gets on the plate for the budget and other major issues in New York State. Well, this guy that was on trial actually decided this. And so to see Sheldon Silver sit there and he was completely powerless, he had no control. Day after day after day, all he could do, the prosecutors were in the first row of chairs, the jury is to the left, and Mr. Silver and his team is in the second row, Richard. And it was just interesting to see the one with the power in this courthouse, Judge Valerie Caproni.
But just for folks who follow this on the periphery, they don't get into too much. Mm-hmm. You can argue that in the 40 years that Sheldon Silver has been in the Assembly, and in the many years that he's been clearly one of the 3 most important people in Albany, it can't be exaggerated in any way, shape, or form. Nothing got voted on unless he blessed it.
That's right.
Nobody got appointments unless he okayed it.
That's right.
If there was going to be an agenda, if there was going to be a budget, if there was going to be any piece of legislation that was going to go through, Democrats so overwhelmingly control the Assembly, He literally pulled all the levers. So to see him convicted and looking at potentially 20 years here, it's stunning for those who always consider him to be the smartest politician in all of New York. And I'm talking about senators, congressmen, governors, and everybody in between.
You know, you just articulately made the case. It can't be overstated. The bottom line, if you don't think that Sheldon Silver had enormous power, go ask former Mayor Michael Bloomberg, who was a billionaire and wanted the stadium on the west side of Manhattan. And Sheldon Silver basically alone said no go for the stadium on the west side for the Jets. And that, to your point, Richard, was actually the end of it. It was just very surprising to sit there and watch this very powerful figure. And, you know, he's got to be hoping that he can have a repeat of Joe Bruno and that that he'll get an acquittal down the road.
Finally, there's another trial going on right in the same complex, and that's the former Senate Majority Leader, Dean Skelos. Couldn't be more different than Silver, right? Between how the trial's going and whether we're asked to connect the dots here in terms of Silver, you don't have to. Just play the tapes, right?
Unfortunately for Mr. Skelos and for his son Adam, the allegation.
Well, family are big fans of the show.
Yes, big fans of the show. Very interesting that they're watching this channel. But you know, Richard, conventional wisdom said Silver had a shot to get off. Skelos is going down. That's a conventional wisdom. So if Silver's convicted on all 7 counts, not looking good, where it's wiretap after wiretap. And Richard, today, this day, was an interesting day in the courtroom. Bright and early this morning, there was a flurry of courtroom activity. Adam Skelos came up to me and said he has been watching our coverage on this TV channel. He then walked over and took his seat at the defense table right next to his father. Dean Skelos at that point also looked over in our direction, nodded, and said good morning as well. Before the jury came in, lawyers then spent some time arguing over witnesses the defense plans to call next week, with prosecutors saying the defense list was unreasonable and unrealistic. 29 witnesses, including someone who is now deceased. Sheldon Silver, on the other hand, convicted just Monday on all 7 counts, did not call a single witness. In wiretaps, prosecutors say father and son often tried to talk in code, use burner prepaid phones, and FaceTime. In one wiretap, you could hear the frustration of the younger Skelos.
Can't even have a conversation with you because you're in f***ing politics about everything. You know, it's just frustrating.
It is.
You know what?
It is.
I honestly hate the job now. Like, you've been doing it for 30-something years. I'm going through a rough time. I want to have a conversation. But just, you know, you could give me real advice rather than, oh, everything will work out.
I can give you advice.
No, but you can't, because you can't talk normally, because it's like freak of horror listening to every phone call. It's just frustrating. All right?
Dean and Adam Skelos say they are innocent. Their defense is expected to start next week.
All right, so Dom, obviously some fireworks today.
Yes.
Let's catch people up today. They've been focusing on this trial. In the Skelos trial, wiretap after wiretap here. And for those who haven't been following closely, give an idea of some of the things that this jury has heard.
Well, for example, within 24 hours, the last 24 hours, the funerals, Richard, on your point of wiretaps, because that's exactly what it is, one after another after another. It's almost like beating on a steady drum, where the Skeloses believed that they were under federal wiretap, and they used, as we said, these throwaway phones and so on. But the U.S. attorney was actually listening and recording all of these conversations.
Just to re-emphasize it, they knew people were probably listening, and they still were going about talking with folks about a few things in common, right? About trying to get work for Adam so he could get some consulting work that obviously had ties to state dollars out of Albany, right?
Yes, and that's where the problem is. even in one wiretap, Richard, talking about, Dad, I need the list of billionaires that have business before the state. In many instances, that's a conviction right there, Richard. It's not, it's almost to the point, and you know, for Adam to come up to us today in the courtroom and say he's watching the show for Skelos, and then his dad nodded, you know, saying hello. But you have to wonder, why did they even go to trial? I mean, I'm not a lawyer, Richard, but it's not looking good.
They tried to, reportedly, the Skelos, to try and seek out a plea deal, but unlike in the Silver case where the prosecution, and again, not knowing the terms, you know, threw something out that the Silver team didn't go for, prosecutors weren't going for any deal in this one. They feel they have that strong a case. Now, the prosecutors put out there, so the defense is going to, and unlike the Silver case, we're hearing there's going to be a bunch of witnesses, right, the defense wants to call, but that's not without controversy.
Right, and as we just mentioned in that piece, and I'm glad you brought it back up, fireworks started early this morning, Richard, in the courtroom. Your point, and we need to restate it so that we're all clear on this, Sheldon Silver and his team decided no witnesses. Well, we see where they got Mr. Silver, and so maybe that's why they're going a different route with Skelos. The Skelos team this morning, the prosecutor started by objecting to the potential witness list of Mr. Skelos, in which the prosecutor's word, as I said a second ago, the Skelos team plans on next week putting on a defense of 29 witnesses. One of the people on the list is actually dead, as we said. And so they're trying to resolve that issue, but they're going to put on a defense, Skelos, and based on what was said, Richard, that defense starts next week.
All right. And next, though, hopefully if we dodge these raindrops, Dom and I are going to be joined by an attorney to talk about what happened in the Silver case, also the Skelos case, some of the legal twists, turns, and surprises. That's straight ahead. Stay with us on RFL.